Everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I am Molly Heffernan with the Tory Burch Foundation, and we have an incredible session queued up. Today, our small business webinar series will be about trade show tactics. It is something that you all have been asking about quite a bit, so we couldn't be more thrilled. And we have two absolutely incredible speakers with us today. We have Shalini Samtani, 2020 Tory Burch Fellow, founder and chief joy architect of Open the Joy, a collection of activity kits for children recovering or suffering from illness. We also have Christa Cotton, another 2020 Tory Burch Fellow, and the founder and CEO of El Guapo Bitters, a line of responsibly sourced bitters and cocktail mixes. Both Shalini and Christa have participated in trade shows and are going to share their expertise and advice with you all. I mean, when I say you are in great hands, you are in the very best hands possible today. So after their presentation, we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. So I ask that you all use the chat for all this fun stuff, connecting with each other, and use the Q&A box to ask your questions. There are a lot of you tuned in. We want to get through as many questions as possible, and we don't want to lose them in the chat. So again, chat box for the fun, Q&A for the serious questions. So today's session will be recorded. A link to that session will be in your inboxes at the end of today. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to our presenters today to take us through everything about trade shows.
Can everybody see?
Yep.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming to listen to us. I know we're both excited to be here. And today we're covering our best trade show tactics, tips, and tricks, things that we've learned from the time we first started to where we are today. So I'm Christa, and as Molly said, I have El Guapo. We're based in New Orleans, and we make bitters, syrups, and mixers.
Yeah, my name is Shalini Samtani. I'm from Princeton, New Jersey, and we make activity kits, cards, toys, all that focus on building emotional intelligence in children. And we actually launched our business. One of our first investments was a trade show. So I'm super excited to be here, and I really hope we could be of service to you today.
So I thought it would be helpful for us to talk about at first the trade shows that we started going to, and then sort of how that's evolved over time. So Shalini launched her business at a trade show. I did not, but one of the first trade shows that I did was about 6 months into actually like having and producing a product. And I started small with Good Food Mercantiles. So if you're in the food business and you're especially in the natural product space, there are smaller trade shows run by the Good Food Foundation that are like a 20th or a 50th of the size of like Fancy Foods in New York. So I started with those. They're much smaller entry point, and we'll talk about pricing and how we made that decision later in the presentation. But I started small, and my first show was in San Francisco with the Good Food Foundation, and then I sort of started experimenting with more order writing shows where people are actually placing orders and you're actually getting revenue from the show that you're attending, which happened at the Atlanta market. That's still one of the biggest shows for us. And then Dallas market, we've tested and may continue to go to. We're still trying to figure that out. And then we kind of used our successes from the smaller shows to pave our path forward and pay the way for us to go to Fancy Foods in New York. We just turned 6 in July, so we're 6 years old, and I just did my first Fancy Food show this year, and we are currently looking into Expo West for next year, and then international shows in some of our largest export markets like Australia and the UAE for 2024 and 2025.
Awesome. That's such an incredible journey, Christa. I think I started off maybe a little bit less planned as Christa did. I started off by walking the shows. And I think a big part of it was because we have Javits Center in my backyard. So I live in New Jersey, and the Javits Center was in New York. And the way I discovered trade shows is I was working, before I even had a company, I was working with a designer, and she told me, come walk a design show with me. And I discovered the Javits Center, and then I started looking, and I realized there's so much that's happening. So when we started, I just started by walking New York Now, and I understood which toy companies were kind of exhibiting. I got a lay of the land. I understood, I tried to understand the business of trade shows just by walking them. And we launched, our first investment was $5,000 and we put it into New York Now. We got a booth over there. It was a great marketing opportunity for us because we won the award for the best new product for kids at that trade show. So that's another thing I just wanted to touch on. If you are new at a trade show, they often are giving out awards and stuff. So do sign up for those, because I don't think it's like huge competition who's signing up for those awards. So it was great marketing when we just started. And then from that show, we did Toy Fair in New York. I stayed in New York because it was less expensive, and we'll get to the expenses after. And then we actually went out to Dallas and we did that in 2022. We did Toy Fest West in 2029. But unlike Christa's journey, we did all our trade shows in 2019, 2020, prior to COVID. We stopped. We stopped completely during COVID for personal reasons. And then right after, we've started picking up this year. And I'm realizing just the importance of trade shows and like getting your name out there and establishing your brand in the business. So if you're kind of in the toy gift area, then New York Now, Atlanta, the same one that Christa goes to. Atlanta is probably the key show for the gifting area. And then toy, if you're in toy, the New York Toy Fair is like your show. And one thing that I would say is take some time to speak to folks in your industry. Sometimes it's hard to even just figure out what trade shows are the right shows for you. So we're still kind of trying to figure out between toy versus gift, like which ones we perform better at. And this year is the first time we're actually doing even an education show, thinking that might be a good one for us. So I don't know. I think Christa, in your case, it was pretty clear, like you kind of knew your path. But for me, I feel like I'm still figuring out what are really the best returns for me on these shows. So sometimes it takes a minute to figure that out.
We definitely also took a break for 2 years. So we did a trade show in San Francisco for the Good Food Mercantile in January of 2020, right before things really got crazy. And then we didn't go back to a trade show until January of 2022, and it was still kind of iffy. So we took a 2-year break, and we definitely have very clear insight into what works for us and what doesn't, just because we're such a niche product and like it's so specific. But we have figured out a few different trade shows more within the bar and beverage industry that we're interested in testing. But sometimes I feel like, there's only so much money to go around. So we sort of have to stop going to one to test out a different one. So our strategy is to keep going back to the ones that are working and maybe test out a new one and drop off our lowest performer every year so that we are getting new exposure, but not leaving behind the shows that actually do provide value. And for us, value is revenue. So
yeah, that's excellent advice. I think I love that strategy. Like maybe look at your shows and drop off one and put in another. And that's, that's actually what we did without realizing it, Christa, because we brought in the education show this year, but we might be dropping one of our toy shows because we want to see if education is a better fit for us. So it's a part of learning, I feel like, which shows work best for you.
absolutely. And for me too, I have a 4-year-old. So I think figuring it out with your kids, the school schedule, what works for you. There's certain things we've wanted to do, but it just doesn't work for our calendar. And that's okay too. You can't be everywhere all the time. But I like the strategy of trying something new, but dropping off the lowest performer just to see how it changes your numbers. Okay, so when we got started, we were the Hot Mess Express. I'll be honest. We did not know what we were doing. The show on the left, where you see the very beautiful brown tablecloth, the water bottle on the table, the boxes in the back, that was the first show in San Francisco. We flew out there with everything. We didn't even know that we should have a branded tablecloth. We knew nothing. The improvement from the left to the right is what we were able to do within the first 9 months probably of working on trade shows. So we were able to get some branded content, and then we still were doing some table setups for most of the smaller trade shows because we just weren't big enough to have a custom booth and a bar and travel with all the stuff. And some trade shows also don't permit that. They don't want you to have a big setup with a lot of stuff. It kind of depends on where you're working, but we definitely started with bare bones. I think these crates were from Target. I mean, we literally paid maybe $300 on the stuff we had on the table at our first trade show. And now I would say our actual booth setup is probably more like $10,000, but that's the evolution of our business over 6 years. So we went from, this kind of basic setup to having very custom setups. The booth in the middle is actually our booth from Atlanta last month, or maybe last month. So this bar, I bought it. It was hideous, and we ended up sanding it down, painting it. It's in our colors. We have all of these custom elements that are very specific to New Orleans, but the 8-foot lavender stalks in person are a real showstopper. The Oprah team was actually rounding the corner, and I noted, he is so visible. I knew exactly who he was, but he stopped because he liked the huge cocktails and the big lavender stalks and the big things of lime. And we ended up having a really great conversation just because of the way the way the booth looked and all the things that we had put in it. But it took us a long time to kind of figure out how to play into our brand, our colors, like the product, and have it all kind of work together. So this was an evolution that took us, several years to get right, and we're still working on it. And I actually just ordered a neon sign to replace the El Guapo sign in the back, so there will be a light up sign that goes in that booth moving forward. But I think your booth is also another way to attract people, and if it really is aesthetically pleasing but it matches your brand, it's a great way to draw people in and get not only buyers but also media to pay attention to what you're doing and care about your story. On the bottom left, this is another trade show booth for the Good Food Foundation, but you can kind of tell over time, I also got better about wearing colorful outfits and just doing things that really spoke to the brand. At first, I would just show up in, my normal street clothes, and I didn't really have branded stuff. I wasn't really sure what I'm doing. And now I kind of have a voice, and there's like a certain aesthetic and look, even with the clothes that I wear, that kind of go with the brand. And I feel like it kind of sets me apart from most of my competition. And then on the right-hand side is actually a booth that was put together by the Tory Burch Foundation for the Embrace Ambition Summit last year. But I feel like the clean aesthetic, the way that all the colors like work together with our product, it gave us the opportunity to actually meet Tory. But the overall look and feel is light years ahead of where we were when we first started with our beautiful brown tablecloth over here.
So this is our booth. So you can see at the top, there's two different settings. There's a 10 by 10 and a 10 by 20. We actually started off with a 10 by 10 in New York now, but it looked very close to the 10 by 20 that you see, because there's a lot fewer products. I think for me, a big part of what I did when I walked shows in the past was I think having that interior design kind of background, I always was like looking like, how is this built? Like, how do they make this? Did they put a carpet on the floor? Like, how is there lighting here? How are these walls holding up? Where's the electric coming from? A lot of those questions were like in my mind before I did my first trade show. So I actually, spent a little bit more when we started. I spent close to $7,000 to $8,000 on our system. And what we did is we bought these slat walls. So this is very much for like, if you need a lot of peggables and things like that, it depends on what kind of product you have. But we have a lot of stuff that pegged. So we needed like something that could hold our product that way. When we did our first trade show, you'll see these little boxes in the back. Those are just like cardboard. They're literally white boxes made from cardboard. But we had bought just those. That was a very minimal budget. But as soon as we had more product, we really needed the slat walls or something to hold it up. So there's gorgeous companies that make them out of wood, and these are made out of plastic, so it's the more inexpensive option. But that's what we ended up doing. So we did the slat walls. We bought this carpet from Wayfair. I bought the furniture, I think, from Wayfair, and we just really kept it like our branded colors. That aqua is a big part of the theme. So we had a lot of the stuff, in that aqua color. And I've noticed, like, as we've gotten more and more products, I feel that our booth is actually getting like too crowded now. So I'm going back to like figure out, how do we simplify this? How do we unify the line, make the messaging super clean and simple, like how we had it in the earlier days? I almost feel like I need to go back to that, because we have so much more product now. So it's a part of it is maybe we get a bigger booth, or, we're still working on that simplification process. But talk to people. Like, you'd be surprised how much people are happy to share and to talk to you if you go to another trade show and you attend one. I got all of this information on how to build a booth by just talking to somebody on the floor who didn't have a customer. If they have a customer, just back off. But if they don't have a customer, they actually want to talk to you, because they don't want to look like, you never want to look like your booth is empty. So they'll be happy to talk to you if there's no customer there. And just talk to them. And that's somebody who told me, okay, this is how you do it. And they even send me like companies, like, how do I find these fixtures? And based on that, we went back home, we went to the drawing board, and this is how we did our booth. The next couple of slides, I actually wanted you to see a little bit about like setup day. So like I said, I really started by doing the New York shows, because Chris is going to talk about this a little bit later as well, but you pay so much money for dryage, and dryage is literally just to take your crate and put it in your booth. So I take my pickup truck, I take my husband's pickup truck for the weekend. I load everything in the pickup truck and I literally take it to the show myself. I keep, a lot of 20s in my pocket to tip all the porters that will help me carry the stuff to the booth. But I think that's how I do it. It's thousands of dollars you're saving. If you could start in something in your backyard, I think is also like a good way just to test it out. But that's New York now, which is bustling, but that's on setup day. Like that's pretty empty. That's what it looks like on setup day. And the next video, I want you to see like the boots as they're going up. And so you'll see in this one, it's just like the boots going up.
Wait, sorry. Wait. Okay, here we go.
So this is kind of what it looks like on setup day. There's crates everywhere. People are just getting started, and I will look at this. This is so pretty. I will send you guys the. So yeah, I just wanted you guys to see like the chaos of setup day, and those crates are what you get shipped there. So that's what we've done for other shows. But if anything is local to you and you're just starting out and you could throw it, like Christa said, she carried everything with her to her first show. If you could throw it in your car, if you could rent a little, it'll save a lot of money and also time, because you have to wait for those crates to reach your booth. And then when you close it, you have to wait for them to bring it back. So I find that to be an efficient way to start. I'm going to show you guys.
This is, sorry, I was trying to go forward. Okay.
In this video, what you're going to see, you could play it, Christa, I could just talk right over this one. So what you're going to see is kind of those slat walls. That's us building the slat walls. And you'll see kind of like that's us building our pop-up display in the back. We do not pay for lighting. It's so expensive. We'll pay for electric, and then we'll put our own lights in. And that's kind of us, those little cardboard boxes I was talking about. That's us kind of building that, and then just, displaying all the product really nicely. And sometimes it takes a few tries to get the product right. And that was kind of the finished product of, what the booth looked like. This was just now at New York Now we did this. I don't know if you've noticed this, Christa, but if you can get chairs, sometimes you'll get buyers just because you have a chair, because they've been walking the whole day. And if they just have somewhere to sit, I've got buyers because they just have a chair so they can come sit inside of your booth. They want to take a break from walking.
It's so true. Oh, wait, it's playing again. I don't. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So, also going through like budgets and like the timeline of how long it takes to prepare for stuff. I feel like different shows work differently. The smaller shows can be more on a whim. I am not in New York. I'm in New Orleans. We're the capital of fun, not the capital of commerce. So I pretty much have to travel to every show that I do. For smaller shows like the Good Food Foundation, I've done those all over the country, Portland, New York, San Francisco. I can pretty much pack everything in a separate suitcase and fly with it. So I'm not paying for shipping. And the shows are so small, they don't really have drayage like the larger trade shows do. So they're more economical. The tables that you're renting are less expensive. So all in with flights, hotel rooms, it's usually me and sometimes me and one other person doing those. They're between $2,000 and $4,000 a piece, depending on the city. And what, either if it's me going alone or if I have another person with me. The markets in Atlanta and Dallas are a little bit more expensive. I have been in the luxe category for the last two markets, which costs a little bit more. You have hard walls. So the pink that you saw in the background, that's actual plaster. It's not a pipe and drape, which most trade shows have if you're just paying for the basic booth setup. Those are between $5,000 and $10,000 a piece. Some of that depends on how many team members do come with me. When it's an order writing show, I have found that there's more buyers and shows are busier. So you kind of need more hands to get everything done. So you're not ignoring potential customers that are coming up. So these are priced with usually 3 different team members. So we'll either get an Airbnb or split 2 hotel rooms. And there's usually 3 of us at these shows in Atlanta and Dallas. So by the time you pay your booth fee, we have hand carried in. For us at this point, we have that large bar, so it does make sense for us to ship it, and we have a rolling crate that we can also share with you guys, like how we put everything in the crate to get it freighted in for us. This includes the freight, the shipping to and from the show, the Airbnb, the booth setup, meals, entertainment, flights, gas for me to drive to Atlanta, whatever the case may be. So $5,000 to $10,000 for those. The Fancy Food Show is the largest trade show that I've done to date. We are a part of this thing called SUSTA, which is the Southeastern United States Trade Association. But if you go to susta.org, even if you're not in my region, you can find the exact same exact same group for your region of the country. And as long as you register in advance, they have a program called 50% cost share. And if you meet all the requirements, which are pretty simple, your products just have to be made in the USA. And they have a list of like sub requirements that, you know, you have to have on your packaging and your labels. They will reimburse for 50% of the cost of going to that trade show. This program is for consumable goods, so it's food and beverage specific. But it did take, so like if that trade show cost us $15K, it was actually $7,500. It's reimbursed, so you have to gather all your receipts and paperwork, and we're still waiting on our check from the government, but we will pay half price for that trade show, which makes it a little bit more affordable as you're growing your business. So we did that for the first time this year, and we are planning on going back in New York, and we may actually do it again in January in Vegas. They have a second show every year. So we're trying to kind of figure out what we think is better for our team, but one way or another, we'll be back at this trade show soon. For Expo West, it's kind of the same thing. It's just in California and Anaheim. The freight is a little bit more expensive for us. It is reimbursed from the government, but it's also a longer trade show. So, you know, taking 3 to 4 people, sending all your stuff, paying a little bit higher price for your actual booth, the space itself within the convention, 15 to 20K. So if we get $10,000 back from the government, you know, it's still $10,000, which is a lot, but it's better than double. And then for the first time, you know, we do a lot of international business at this point. We're currently exporting to 8 countries. Our longstanding largest export partner is Australia, and they have a large fancy food show. I just spent 3 weeks in the UAE in January negotiating a distribution deal there, and they have another large food distribution trade show that happens. So those are our next opportunities that we're looking at. And the government is really interested in food and beverage businesses that are willing to export. So again, SUSTA is willing to pay 50% of that fee. So that's one thing that we are seriously considering for 24 and 25.
Awesome. Oh, you're a rock star, Christa. You really are.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
So we started, as I showed you, at New York Now. So we do that trade show really depends on the boot size. So this time I saw something for the first time, which might be really nice for first time comers. We started off with the 10 by 10, which is the smallest booth, but now I'm noticing they have like little tables and like even quarter booths. And I think they're really doing a lot of that to attract new folks. And a big part of it is how much product you have. Think about how much product you have in terms of how much you need to fill a booth. You know, that's a big part of the trade-off. So like I could never do one of those little tables because we just have so much product to show. But I think when you're starting off, you could do that. And something that I saw that was really cool is I saw this woman, when I was walking the show this time, she had just one of those small tables and I saw her product. She had one product, but her one product was in Target. So like, you know, that show worked for her. Like even that one table with that one product, she got it in, she showed it at the right show. So I think a big part of your booth size is also going to depend on, you know, how much product you really need to display. So we started with a smaller booth in New York Now. We went up to the larger booth size in New York Now. Those are between $5,000 to $10,000 for us. And the reason it's less expensive again is because I'm maybe staying 2 nights in a hotel. I'm schlepping it back home to see my kids in the night. You know, one day they want me home, and then even my staff is coming in. They're not staying in the hotels. They're coming in from, they're coming into the city. They're going back. So the New York shows are a little less expensive for me because of the hotel cost. When I did Dallas last year, I did that in a rep booth. So I wanted to talk to you guys about that. There's a possibility if you work with a rep, or, if you're thinking about working with a rep, you can actually display in their booth. So it's a lot smaller space because you don't have, your brand statement, but you're going to get all your reps traffic. So all the buyers that are going to see the other lines that your rep has, you're going to get their traffic into your, to come close to your product line as well. So that's another option, like to either do the smaller tables or to maybe display in a rep's booth, but you have to build that relationship. So I actually did our Dallas show last year in a rep booth, and that cost me a lot less. I think I just shipped by a FedEx some of the product over, and I went down for the show. Toy Fair is our show. So, Christa was mentioning, Fancy Foods is your show, right, Christa? That's like the big show in your industry. So for us, it's Toy Fair. If you're going to do a show and you're in the toy industry, that's really the one that we want to spend on. So we've done a $10,000 booth, the double size, a 10 by 20. And this year we're actually even contemplating going up to the 20 by 20, which is really large. But like that's where I'm going to, potentially meet Walmart or Michael's or Joanne, or that's where my big buyers are going to go. I think of it as like, the nicest dress you're going to wear, you're going to wear to this ball, that's the one where we'll put out the bells and whistles, and we want to really show up beautifully at that show. And that's something, also wanted to touch on. Your appearance at your show is like how they're judging your brand, so it's like, me and Christa were talking about this in preparation for today, but even like, make sure your catalogs are a nice paper. It depends on who you're going after. If you're going after these high-end companies, they're looking at you and they're saying, hey, can you even take my PO in my case? So if it's a really large PO that if they're thinking, if it's a big retailer and they're thinking, can this company take my PO? If you're in a 20 by 20, they know you've already dropped 20 grand there. So they know that you're not that small a player. So that's a part of it, but you really do have to gauge your business and see if you've reached that point or not. The person with the one table got into Target with her one product as well. So gauge your business and see if you're there. For us, where we are going to spend the most money will be Toy Fair. And it's the show that we built our business off of. We launched at Toy Fair. That's when we picked up our first large customer, which was Target. And they basically financed the growth of our company over the last 3 years. So that was like my first drop, and you are kind of risking it, Christa. You never know, right? Like you are kind of going fishing, you're going fishing, and, you're just trying to get into the right ponds, making sure you're close to the right buyers, getting yourself ready. Toy Fest West is the toy show for the West Coast. We did that 1 year. We did it prior to the pandemic. So it was a good show for us because we won an award, and all these awards are good for your accolades and whatnot. They're great marketing tools for you to have. But we had like a distributor for the Hawaiian market who was interested in our line, but we lost a lot of those leads because it was right before the pandemic. I felt like that was maybe not the best. It was a good show, but the follow-up from that show wasn't the best that I have experienced in that one. And this is a new one. We're venturing out into education. We want to see how our product does in education. So we just did this show, and we didn't do the large booth or anything. We just did the 10 by 10 for this one to kind of walk the show. I am going to take somebody with me for this show because you need time to walk the show to understand who your competitors are. Are you in the right pond? Do you fit? Who the buyers are? So, save some time if you do a show to have somebody watch your booth so you could walk the show.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. All right. So expectations, I think one thing that was surprising to me were the eye-popping freight costs. And then as we've gotten bigger and bigger, those numbers seem to multiply. But there's also a huge difference between unionized and not unionized in my experience. So when we're shipping inbound to Atlanta, and then it's being delivered to our booth by Fern, which is the freight company that works with that market, versus in New York, what happens at the Javits Center, it's the exact same box, it's the exact same weight, it's the exact same everything, and it is over 3x the price in New York than it is in Atlanta. And that isn't the actual charge for freight. Like obviously it's further for New York, but this is just the cost of like what the Javits charges versus what the market center in Atlanta charges. So freight costs can be surprising, and they can incrementally increase what you're spending at a market. So watch out for those. And if you don't actually have to freight things in and have things in rolling carts, don't do it until you absolutely have to do it, is my advice. And kind of like what we were talking about with, buyers sussing you up to see if you are capable and at the point of where you can take some of these larger orders. I feel like branding really matters in that respect too. They're really looking at how polished you are, the professionalism. Do you have your business cards? Does your paperwork look like you're ready? If you're fumbling around for things or you don't necessarily have everything, I think not that they're like grading you, but I think that psychologically people do take notes and they see how organized you are and how much you have it together versus if you don't. And then also follow up on the same regard. The longer it takes you to follow up, I think that kind of in buyers' minds resonates with them. And not that you should be as soon as someone walks away from your booth 5 minutes later emailing them. Maybe there's like a cadence and a happy medium, but if it takes you a year or a month or longer to follow up, I feel like there's a natural attrition that happens. You lose some of the buyers who probably would have worked with you, but they're also looking at you they're always evaluating you. So the longer it takes you to reach out, the less ROI you're going to have on what you already spent to be at the trade show, and realizing and budgeting time for you to do that, because the follow-up takes longer than the actual setup and time that you spend in the booth itself. The follow-up is the hard part, in my opinion. But anyway, be ready for that. I do think that line sheets and business cards are so important. There's a huge move towards digital versus physical. So, there's different apps out there like Blink, BLINQ. That's what I use. There's other ones as well. Some people have it where it's just attached to their phone, so you can like bump phones with people and it'll share their contact information. Those are really important and great ways for you to share info, but you also need to make sure that it has your professional info and not like your home address, your home email. Like, it needs to be work specific. I've seen some people make that mistake, and then everything goes to their personal and not to their professional. And that's another nightmare to kind of manage. But the art of the follow-up is the most important thing. And one thing that we were talking about in prep for this call is really the law of attraction. Everyone loves to see a busy booth. We are always, in costume. We wear crazy headpieces. We are always having fun. I'm from New Orleans. We play Zydeco and Cajun music. We have people that are always, it's not like obnoxious, but it's enough for people to kind of, enjoy it. And it's a little bit different. So we always have people sort of milling about right in front of us. And buyers are always coming over to see what's new and interesting and where the people are kind of hanging out. So you need your own little hook to get people to be hanging out near you. It took me a while to kind of figure out what mine were, but we always make sure that we have our portable speakers. We always make sure to dress in costume. Where I have a rule that you're not allowed to be on your phone in the booth. There's nothing worse than seeing a buyer walk straight past and having the person in whatever booth texting and not paying attention, and you've already lost that buyer. If you're not looking up, smiling, excited to be there, you are losing out on potential opportunities for people to come up to you. And I know that sometimes it's hard. There are long days, you're on your feet. It can be a lot, but I really think that it matters a lot, and presentation is everything, and you only get one chance to make a really great first impression.
Yeah, I agree with Christa completely. I'm going to go upwards on the second part of the slide because I'm going to just jump onto the law of attraction. And we were talking about that. It's like, I think there has to be a fine balance between like, that used car salesman who's like pulling you into the booth and versus like, very tactfully how Christa, you're doing it. And I feel like it's like attract, don't chase, like, you be gorgeous. You do you be fantastic. You have your costumes on, you be ready, you have your show, you got your party, you're ready to go. And I think just like, don't be desperate. Like, I know it's hard because you spent all this money on this show and you want to recoup it. But I feel like, I think this is just like my experience and my age maybe showing here, but a part of me is like, it's like, you really just gotta be good in yourself and go to these shows because a lot of it is energy. I feel like I remember my first shows when I did them 5-6 years ago, and I was like feeling like so nervous all the time. Like I remember feeling like this anxiety, like, and then, if somebody walked by your thing, it's like, I would actually almost take it personally. Like, oh, they don't like me, or they don't like my product. Cause for all of us, our products are like our babies. So I think over time, I've just come to understand that the right product market fit is what you're looking for. So the buyer who knows that they're going to be able to sell through your product is going to stop by, and they are going to want to see you, and they are going to want to meet you. And of course, don't be on your phone, and be available for that. But like I've sold product to like really the wrong person, and it just ends up burning you in the end. It really is like a part of that. Just know who you are, be confident who you are, attract, they will come. I'm going to go up to the next one. And people really do love meeting the owner. There's some charm about that they love to see, like when you tell them that, oh, you're the owner, you're the founder, you get to tell them your founder's story. They love that. They actually stop for a minute. Like, they're not shopping for a minute, and they're like stopping, and they want to engage with you at a human level. And I think that's probably really important also, if you're trying to build long-term relationships, is to connect with them at a human level. I'll have people, because we started off in the medical, and my personal stories, my daughter was diagnosed with this incredibly rare disease. So if somebody's talking to me for long enough and they ask me, but why did you start this? Why do you start doing this? And when I tell them that, I could tell you the stories I hear in return. Like, there are these beautiful stories that people will tell me in return. So I think take it as an opportunity to also just connect with people at the show. Take time to crosswalk the show. I think that's so important. Look at what your competitors are doing, see how their booths are set up, look at like where the market is at. There's so much that you learn by walking the show. My next one is to listen, listen, and listen to what these people are saying when they're talking to you. I think a lot of it is like, okay, we want to sell our product or we want to show our passion, but a big part of it is like listening to what they're saying, because they're your buyer. They're the one who knows what's going to sell for you. So I remember at our first show, we had a bag called the Feel Better bag. One customer came in and he spent so much time with me and he looked at it and he opened it and he said, I want a rainy day and an on-the-go bag because I could sell that in my store. We created a rainy day and on-the-go bag, and it outperforms maybe 10-1 our Feel Better bag. So I feel like the feedback you'll get from people who actually are taking the time to engage with you is normally the best feedback you'll get. So take that as a learning opportunity. And again, long game customers versus instant buys. I think, Christa spoke before about like writing shows versus non-writing shows. I'm still not completely sure which is a writing show versus a non-writing show. Like I went to one show thinking it was a non-writing show and I wrote like one of the hugest orders I've ever written at a trade show at that one. So it's like, sometimes it's strange for me, but I always say you can't really tell how a show was for you until almost a year later. Like a year later is like when a lot of these larger contracts, it takes that long for them to materialize. So I think understand also that shows are also a big part of it is like playing the long game. It's not just a quick, it's not a farmer's market. It's a trade show. It's a little bit different. There is a long game that's going to happen there. And I don't know if you do this, Christa, but I very quickly try to maybe not close a deal, but close a deal with a sample. So I will tell them if I know
Oh,
that
yeah.
a good buyer, I'm like, oh my God, amazing. I don't want you to carry anything. Let me ship you a sample. And if it's a serious buyer, they love to have samples shipped to them because they don't want to carry anything. And then that's a real way to like follow up with a tracking number. And so you're already starting the conversation that way.
We also have these things called bitter babies. I wish I actually had one here that I could show you, but it's enough to make 2 old fashions. And I used to carry them, and I still do carry them in my purse because people always ask about it. And it's enough to like give someone something, but they're like $1 a piece. It's not crazy expensive or heavy for me to carry around. And then we started having just a big bowl of them at trade shows. And they're one of the most popular things with our buyers because they can stick them in their pocket, their purse, whatever. They're, tiny. You can make 2 cocktails on a plane and they walk away from our booth and they continue to pay dividends. It's amazing how many customers and buyers come back to us and say, I remember that time you gave me this thing. I still have it, on my bar. I love it. Or I used it. And that's why I started buying your product because I really liked it all the time. Now we have competitors who've stolen this idea and do it for themselves. But the sample thing is super important. And even though it can seem really expensive to ship samples to all these people, generally speaking, it does come back and pay dividends. So that's another cost of trade shows and just selling in general that you have to expect. But the samples are an important part of closing deals for sure.
Yeah.
Benefits. One of my favorite things about going to trade shows is honestly hanging out with fellow business owners. Some of my closest friends in business or people that I've met through the Tory Burch Fellows program, people that were in our fellowship class. It's amazing to me how many times we run into each other at trade shows and just working in general, but it's fun to plan dinners. It's fun to see catch up on business, see what each other are doing. We sometimes can plan collaborations or events. It just kind of depends on what people have going on. But even just within my floor and like even within my section, actually, there were 8 booths in the Lux section of food in July, and 3 of us were Tory Burch Fellows. So that is a really great way to, keep up with people, not just have a relationship, but sustain a relationship over time, because chances are you're going to be in each other's presence again and again and again. So it's really rewarding to be around each other and build a strong relationship with the people that are doing the same things as you. And I also have enjoyed like planning dinners and client meetings and using my trade show time outside of the actual time in the booth to accomplish things. My main customers are bars and restaurants, and everyone has to have dinner. So it's convenient to make reservations and plan in advance so that when we are, taking time off, we're still spending our money and going to places that are supporting our business. And we kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone whenever we're in a market. And that has been really helpful for us as we've continued to grow. We also are always walking the show. We're looking for collaboration opportunities and different giveaway opportunities. I'll never miss an opportunity to add an email address or a social media follower to our platform. I think that's really important. And a lot of the businesses that we work with and do things with are people that we've either met or continue to have relationships with through trade shows. And to Shalini's point, I think that looking to see what your competitors are doing, one of the best ways to see what they're really up to, what their new product releases are, is to look at trade shows. I am very visible in my costume with my headpiece. So I oftentimes will have friends that are around me or, just interested in what my competition is doing, report back to me or tell me what other people are doing, because I think it can be a little off-putting if, you walk into your direct competitor's brand, like fully branded as your company, but it's a great way for you to kind of see what's going on in your space. So I always try to make time for that while I'm there. And then also just catching up with the Tory Burch Fellows and other business owners that I know to see what shared networks and connections may be helpful. I have shared information for, people's number one dream collaborator for like celebrities or social media influencers that I know from my previous life in advertising. People have done that for me to be able to send samples to people that I would love to work with. And I think building that relationship and making sure that it's mutually beneficial, but sharing resources is really important. And trade shows are a great time to take advantage of that and make sure that you're, asking for what you need, but also giving what you have in resources in return.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo that, Krista. I find that the world is a friendly place at trade shows. Like I find that people just help each other out. That's been my experience. Like even if they are competitive, they're happy to tell you, like, and it's the same thing with us. Like we're happy to share information with these other competitors or other brands and whatnot, because I don't know, I guess it's what you put out is what you're going to get back. And truthfully, I always have this issue about competition because it's so hard to execute, like Krista could give me all her recipes tomorrow and I would not be able to execute that. So I feel like it's just sharing that, you know what you know how to make and you know what you know how to do. So I find that it's so helpful. Like I just, it's just recently in New York now, and the neighbor behind me explained to me how he built his sales network in my industry. And he like literally wrote notes for me on like, this is the position you need to put up. And this is, so it's like so interesting to speak to people who are a little bit behind you and a little bit ahead of you. And you get to do that at a trade show. And they'll tell you how they got from this step to this step. And, and you can tell somebody how you got from where you are to the next step. So I find that's really, really a fun thing about the networking at trade shows. Continued exposure. So when it comes to Binger, I'm really focusing the business a lot on mass market. So a lot of these guys want to see you over and over again. They want to know that you're a trusted brand and you're not a fly by night, because so many companies pop and they're gone, So I think showing up consistently and like showing up like in the same location, the same kind of booth area, it shows that you're a consistent brand. You're there, you're there for the long run. You get incredible leads. It depends on, we've built our business from trade shows. I have done very little in direct to consumer, marketing and stuff like that. Our big marketing expense is our trade shows. You get great leads from trade shows. You learn about the industry. If you guys are looking to build out a rep network, I started doing that at trade shows. So like I would put up just a little sign in my booth saying looking for reps. So sometimes if you're looking to build out a rep network, that would be helpful to do that at trade shows. Know what you want before you start. Cause I started doing that a little bit early and I made a lot of mistakes and I think maybe if I did it now, a little bit more clarity of my strategy to go across the country, it would be a better outcome, but it is a way. I've seen many people get their distributors, get their reps. A lot of that will happen at trade shows. And you get branch off business opportunities and ideas. Like I really never thought about licensing our products, but it's been few trade shows now that I've had licensing companies come up to me and say, your art is gorgeous, and we're going to try it. Like one of them is giving us an offer to do it. Like it was a no-brainer. We didn't have to pay for anything. We go on their platform. But we did that at a trade show. Like I wouldn't even have thought of like, these other branches or opportunities for the business. But that was super interesting that we got that opportunity, the licensing opportunity at the trade show. And the other opportunity that we got is like we get on different platforms sometimes because we're at these trade shows. So like there's a lot of people that are trying to sell you to at a trade show. It's not only like so you kind of know if they're coming to sell you versus they're coming to buy, you know it right away. But again, nobody wants an empty booth. So you talk to everybody, and when they're coming to sell you, sometimes I've been sold some pretty cool things, some really like financing opportunities, all sorts of interesting things people come around to sell you as well.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of people there to sell you. Be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so timely follow-ups, I think we already kind of covered that, but it is super important. I think people also feel that you value their time when you take the time to actually follow up with them. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when I'm talking to entrepreneurs is they'll follow up once and then there's no recurring follow-up. So I think that steady follow-ups after the fact, whether you're doing that, biannually, quarterly, whatever cadence works for you. I'm currently personally emailing every single customer that we have a direct relationship with. I'm currently on the K's. I'm supposed to be to the M's by the time I go to bed tonight. Fun fact. But I think it's super important to keep that communication going because you do get follow-up orders if you continue to reach out. And I still close different accounts that we have met at trade shows or, years earlier, sometimes before COVID at trade shows. And they'll be like, you know what? I like the fact that you're consistent and you constantly reach out and we're going to give it a shot. And here's your $3,000 purchase order. And those add up over time. So, the steady follow-ups are super important. I write a lot of handwritten notes. I am Southern. My mother is very strict. I had to start doing this when I was young, and it's something that I have stuck with. I probably write, I don't know, 20 to 30 handwritten notes a month and send those out. I also send those out to big buyers with samples. I just sent one to Delta Airlines this morning. Those really work. I also have calligraphy pens and I write calligraphy on the front of every envelope, and they're just very specific and special, and they look like me, but they also look like the brand, and those pay a lot of dividends. I can't underscore enough the power of a handwritten note. A lot of people don't check their emails, and people have other assistants that do things for them, but people generally always check their own mail. And if you're writing a handwritten note, that's something that will stick in someone's mind for a long time. The selfie trick, that's something that we've talked a lot about while we've been preparing for this. This is me and Brian Batt at Atlanta Market. I know Brian personally from here in Atlanta, but he always makes a point to come by my booth when we're in Atlanta, which is really sweet. He's a customer. They have a store here in New Orleans, but the selfie that we take with various buyers, we've done it, with huge accounts. We've done it with celebrities. We've done it with, just people that are very specific to our brand that make a bunch of sense. But sending the selfie with your follow-up also is a great way. And we also share these on social media. So don't underestimate the power of a good selfie. And then we also are militant about, at the end of shows, we take all of our cards that we've collected and we make sure that we put those in Klaviyo. It's our email system. We have a separate list for our newsletter that goes to direct to consumer, but we have a separate list for our wholesale customers. So we put in all the contact information, and then right before we go to the next trade show, we share, here are booth specials, like here's what we're selling that's new and different. Here are the discounts that we're offering. Here's our booth location. That's really important. And we share that with everyone. And it's kind of amazing how many people say, oh, you move locations. I never would have known where you were, but I saw that email and I pulled it up and I came and found you, because the Javits Center is massive. And the Atlanta Market Center is 3 buildings, and 2 of the buildings are 17 stories high. And it's really hard in this massive, place to find 1 10 by 10 booth. So the emails really help your buyers that are on a mission but want to find you, know where to locate you, and also find you when they're in your area, because it's not the kind of setup where you can be on building 3, floor 15, and then you're going to building 1, floor 1. Like, you're not zigzagging like that. You're kind of like tackling an area, and you want to give every buyer the opportunity to find you and make it easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I really ditto everything that Christa just shared with you guys. And I also want to tell you, I actually learned from that mistake. I went to the WeBank conference and I wasn't exhibiting there. I was just walking the floor there, and I had just some samples with me kind of in my backpack, but I got some incredible meetings there. I got a meeting with Disney. I got a meeting with Delta Airlines. I got a meeting with like the buyer of Dick's. I got a meeting with the buyer of Home Depot, like some incredible meetings, but I did not follow up the way you needed to follow up after that conference, because a big part of it was they had all these portals for minority owned businesses and women owned businesses. And there was like hundreds of hours, I felt like, of paperwork. And it was just right in smack in the summer, and I didn't do the follow-up I needed to do correctly. And I felt like all those leads went cold. So I want to share that experience with you guys, because And that, in a regular I think the tip you gave Krista in the beginning, like make sure after your conference, your show, you're actually booking 3 or 4 days that you're just doing follow-up. So now I do that for our shows, but that other show where I walked the show, I didn't realize how important it was for me to do it for that show as well. And I could tell you, I haven't gotten a single order. All of that went cold. If I want to do that, I'm going to have to walk that show again. And that's a show where I think I would take an assistant, because I think there's so much of that documentation that needs to happen before you could get into these different portals. So definitely, I think that's the best advice, is a follow up. And then here's my selfie. I try to get my brand name as much as possible in the selfie. And I also try to get, like, if there was a product they were really interested in, I try to get that product in the selfie as well. But yeah, that's our self. It was funny. We were laughing because both of us did the same thing. Like, we never discussed that. And like, selfie, like, yep, we do the selfie trick. So I hope that's fun for you guys. Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, you're done. Well, we are not done, because there are so many questions for you both. So I want to kind of start from the beginning with one of the baseline questions for a lot of people here who maybe haven't even tackled trade shows as part of their strategy. How did you both take the time to identify what even the trade shows were in your industry? Like, that research process can be some of the most daunting. So what approaches did you all take to get a lay of the land?
I pulled my, sorry.
No,
I
no,
pulled,
go ahead,
I pulled my friends. That was important. And then the internet. And I just started also taking tallies on what showed up the most frequently, and then kind of went from there, started getting pricing. You kind of weed out the ones that are way too expensive to start, the ones that might be not a great success based on their location, and then just sort of whittling down what you think might be a fit. And then you just kind of got to roll the dice and go for it.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Trade shows is you're rolling the dice and you're going for it. And I think talk to people. I think that was the most important thing I did, is I walked the show first. I walked the show the year before. I understood what the show was, and I talked to people, and like, people will talk, like, people are nice. Like, I found, like, I would talk to like Ty's like a big teddy bear company. I was like, who's walking the show? Who are the buyers that are coming to you? And they're like, Barnes and Noble comes here. I'm like, okay, maybe I should be here. Barnes and Noble shows up here, like, and talk to people and see, as long as they don't have a customer, they're happy to talk to you, So I feel like walk a couple of shows if you can, and talk to as many people as you can at that show to understand if it's the right fit for you.
Great. So do the Google research, get really in there, figure out what it is, and attend, get a lay of the land before you start putting dollars into this, because it's a big investment.
And you might have to, like, my real trick was I got somebody at the show before I exhibited to give me an exhibitor badge. That's how I was able to walk the show. So like, if you know anybody in the industry, it doesn't cost us. Like, if anybody wants to come to Toy Fair, like, if you know somebody in the industry and you want an exhibitor badge, it's thousands of dollars for like a badge to walk the show. Or some shows are not as expensive, but you get somebody who's on the inside to get you in and then walk the show.
Yeah. So this is all about being incredibly scrappy too. I mean, that's absolutely a theme. For you both, how did you know and understand what the difference between one where, and if I have the terminology right, was going to be an order writing show versus not? Like, what can you define, just break down the difference between those for a second?
So I feel like this is one thing that's gotten like skewed, kind of like, it used to be like, at this show, these people are showing up to literally give you their credit card and place their order on site. And at these shows, you're not allowed to do that, but you're allowed to get their contact information and follow up after the fact. So for Fancy Foods, they do say absolutely no writing. That does happen, but you're not supposed to do it. So there's less of an emphasis on having a show special, because it's not exactly about like that person placing an order in the moment, and they're usually much larger buyers. So it's kind of different, but I didn't really understand that difference until the first time I went to Atlanta Market. And I think that cost us about $12,000 the first time we did it. And we walked away with over $50,000 in sales, like booked sales in my bank account. We ran their credit card. So that worked out great for me the first time, but that was the first time I'd ever been to a quote unquote order writing show. And I don't know why there's a difference, and there just is, I don't know, but it seems to me more and more that like, buyers that don't write orders on the spot go to market anyway. And then some people that, do want to write orders go to Fancy Foods, even though they're not supposed to place orders there. I don't know.
So a little bit of a be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
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 No, And to follow up, because one of the key questions that has come in from everyone is really, how are you going into those shows? Are you going in with a kind of KPI or a sense of what kind of ROI you want to have on the show in advance? And how did you set that? Or did you kind of have to get your feet wet first before you could really develop what the true KPI should be?
Both. Like, literally both. You go in with some type of a KPI, and in the beginning when I started, I just wanted to make my $5,000 back, that's all I wanted. I
Cover your
wanted cost, yeah, I wanted to make my cost back for the show, but like I ended up getting Indigo Canada as our first customer at that show. So it kind of showed me the worth of the company already. Like, okay, your product is good enough that that level of buyer is looking for that product. And that's when I started upping the shows, because I was like, okay, this is where they hang out. So a big part of it is like, you want to at least make what you put into the show back. But it's really going back to your previous question. Some of these shows are not writing shows, so you don't know until a year out. Like when we did a Dallas show, that was the show that I didn't even go with like a process payment thing, because it's not supposed to be a writing show. And then somebody placed a $10,000 order at that show. I'm like, of course I'll have my process payment thing. And I figured it out, I made some calls, I figured it out, and I took the 10 grand, but my point is, it's like that show was one where I didn't even have anything prepared to write an order. I was shocked when they were asking me to write orders. It's not supposed to be a writing show, but that's a show where we got Staples as a customer. So it's kind of like, but Staples placed their order like 9 months later.
Right.
So it's like, I think your KPIs, you definitely want to at least break even, but you don't know until you're going to the show what's going to happen. I mean, I don't know, Christa, if you have a more sophisticated answer than that.
No, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you figure it out when you go along. I think when I first started, a good show was break even. Like that was the goal. If we could do that, A+. Now it's more, for every dollar I put in, there is an ROI associated with it, but we also, we've raised money, we have a board, we're larger. Like there's a lot of expectation that kind of comes along with that. So at this point, if for whatever I spend, I would like to be able to attribute 4x or more to that show 18 months out, because some of these orders are longer leads. It takes a lot of follow-up. I'm still talking to people now that I met, pre-COVID at trade shows, but I also am bidding. I can tell you I'm bidding my first $1 million project from somebody I met at Atlanta Market in January. So that project might not close until 2025, but if we were able to book that, if that show cost me $15,000, but we got $1 million order out of it, worth it.
Correct. And that's how crazy it could be. Like, Chris, I'm so glad you're being so honest about the numbers, but that's how insane it could be. And that's why when I'm thinking about Toy Fair this year, I'm like 10 to 20, let me just roll the dice, because you don't know what you're going to come out with.
So I'm going to try and squeeze in, because we have 1 minute left. I'm going to squeeze in 2 more questions. One was about reps. Shalini, you mentioned that you exhibited within a rep booth. How do people find reps? What is that relationship like? Like, break down what it means.
The representative is really the country gets divided. So the country, like there's different regions in the country, and those people will carry your line within that region, and they will literally be foot soldiers and go store to store to store and service those clients for you. But you need to have a representative group, and you can't have one for the country. You have and then you learn within your industry who's strong within which region. And again, I learned all this by talking to neighbors at trade shows. Like this person is strong in this rep group is strong in this region. So that's how you build your rep group out. So that's what a rep is. Yeah.
And then my last question, we're going to sneak in here. So at any point early on, did either of you worry about the company being too small to be at a show? And did you make efforts to look bigger than you were? Like, were you putting on airs to be something that you weren't, or were you like, here's where we're at?
I'm still doing that. We were, of course, we are where we are today, but you're always trying to go to the next level. You're always trying to get that next, the more door count, the bigger clients. You're always doing that,
Yeah. Great. Well, there were so many questions. We're so grateful for both of your time today. I think what this means to us is that we probably need a part 2 on trade shows at some point. But we're so grateful that you both were so candid and so honest with our community here tuning in. This insider information is invaluable. And I think a lesson to all of us tuning in that like power of community and honest communication, leveraging the power of your network is so key to leveling up as a business owner.